Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are looking at the Acclamator class assault ship. This was alternatively referred to as the Acclamator class transgalactic military transport ship or Acclamator class uh, troop ship. I'm not going to read through all these. So, initially when we see the clones kind of getting loaded up, we see them getting loaded up on the Acclamator uh, assault ships in episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and we kind of go from there. This was a heavy assault ship created for the Galactic Republic by Rothana Heavy Engineering. It was the predecessor to the later Republic and Imperial models in the Star Destroyer line. So, this is one of the first canon kind of Star Destroyers that we got to see. Uh, and of course, this is, what George had kind of agreed to having for Attack of the Clones. So when we have some of the other ships that were designed by Westing Games as predecessors and stuff that was in the Clone Wars, it doesn't really take away from them because George Lucas had always mentioned that there would be more ships in the background that we just didn't see on camera, and he loved it when Hasbro or um, uh, Kenner were making different ships or vehicles, kind of based off of some of the stuff that we would typically see, but not exactly. And then he himself had mentioned, and I've seen it in videos in the past, where these are just vehicles that were off screen. So just kind of going from there. So characteristics wise, the Acclamator class assault ship was 752 meters long, 460 meters wide, and 200 meters in height. Its mission profile required it to both carry troops and engage enemy starfighters. The Acclamator was designed to assault contested systems, break hostile orbital blockades, and land troops directly to the battlefield. Consequently, the Acclamator favored a wedge or dagger shape design due to the effectiveness. It allowed concentration of firepower while minimizing target profile. The basic design was used in a number of larger craft predating it and would define Imperial ships for decades to come. To under, the underside of the Acclamator was dominated by a large assault hangar capable of offloading an entire legion of clone troopers and their vehicles in short order. Most of the passenger and barrack decks were located on the upper levels of the Acclamator class ship. The bridge was located in the middle of an arrow-shaped command tower module that protruded from the dorsal superstructure. The tower module was a standard design for smaller ships in Kuat drive yards, Starship Catalog, which Rothanda supplied vessels to. The main bridge and command center had no windows but relied upon advanced holoscreens shaped like triangular viewpoints similar to the ones on the Kuat vessels. The bridge crew usually consisted of a fully armored clone pilots manning the control panels, with most operators being seated in twin crew pits below the command officer's area. Sensors and communication suites were located at the front of the ship's command tower. Complement the Acclamator class ships had berths for 16,000 clone troopers, the equivalent of an entire legion or brigade, and its support personnel. They also carried 80 aircraft and 84 armed, or 80 and 80 84 armored vehicles. Okay, so I can say this correctly. So it's 80 aircraft and 84 armored vehicles, such as the ATTE and the SPHA Walkers, used to provide clone troopers with heavy battlefield support. In addition to ground landings, the Acclamator Class ships were capable of water landings and displayed, or as displayed at the Battle of Montgomery. Each Acclamator class ship held 320 speeder bikes used by clone troopers for fast battlefield reconnaissance and patrol duties, 80 low altitude assault transports, the LAATs, um, of which around 66 were infantry gunships and around 14 were vehicle carriers. The carry and they were carried uh, to insert personnel vehicles and cargo into battlefield zones, in addition to providing close air support. Gunships were suspended along an overhead cir- circulating rail on the upper hangar and maintenance or for maintenance procedures during travels. A lower, smaller hangar area was used to embark and disembark ground troops and material via a large ramp when landed. The two levels were connected with elevator platforms. So really the ship has got a lot of stuff going on. And there is a nice diagram here, and let's kind of open this up here and see what we can see. Um, One of the big things that I'd like to kind of take away on on these ships is, you can see a big portion of the engine sitting here. If you're just listening to this, um, through the center of the ship, we have an engine module as well as what looks like fuel storage containers. Okay, on the left and on the right, so the port and starboard, this is where we have all the vehicles, all of the fighters, crew stations, and all that stuff, all of the berthing racks and all that. And um, one of the things that was brought up in the Clone Wars is essentially everybody's sleeping in more or less a pod. So whatever the ship goes through in the course of its duties, if you're a clone trooper and you're just trying to get some sleep or whatever, you climb a ladder, open up your bed, it pulls out, you jump in, and it goes in. So now you're contained inside of a little cocoon. Excuse me. So if the ship rocks back and forth or takes damage, you're not thrown out and then onto the ground, which could be a good distance. Sometimes looking at how how far some of these clones had to actually climb up, it looks like you could be dropping down 30, 40 feet if you're unlucky. So it is an interesting concept. I do like how they had put that in there, so we got to see some of this stuff. Of course, this is from uh, Attack of the Clones itself, so we got to see all this. And the engines hanging out, we don't have to take up as much internal room as we do in the later Star Destroyer class vessels. There's a lot of room inside that's taken up by the engines compared to these because the engines are sticking out. That saves them internal room. Now, it can also be argued that later on, the engines are a little bit uh, shielded better because there is a superstructure around the engines. So I will grant all of that. I'm not going to take anything away from it. But there is also the thought of now you're taking up space that could be used for berthing uh, crew, troops, vehicles, whatever. So, um, but still, it is a wonderful design. It is nice to see George Lucas had that progressionary thought along the way as well. Okay, I think we already hit this. So, offensive and defensive weapons. So, despite being largely a transport for landing forces, these ships were armed well enough to engage in planetary bombardment or ship to ship engagements. Armed with four heavy turbo launch heavy torpedo launch tubes, 24-point defense cannons rated at 6 megatons per shot, and 12 quad turbo laser turrets, each rated at a maximum of 200 gigatons per shot. The whole armor of the Acclamator class vessels were impregnated with ultra dispensive neutrinium that withstood the massive uh, energy blast. As I'm trying to find my spot here. Fusion rockets fired by enemy forces barely made a scratch on the hull as a result. Groups of these ships could perform base Delta Zero, an orbital bombardment that would exterminate all life on the planet. And later, Acclamator 2 class could also serve as star frigates to support their landing groups. So it's nice that we get to see that, but honestly, I don't think that's one of the ships that I have in my book. So we will have to do a special one for that. I may not have stats for it, but we will definitely have to look into that one. Okay, so the Acclamator, um, the main reactor was located in the middle of the vessel inside the main superstructure, which I kind of pointed out, and was preceded the frontal half of the ship with multiple fuel tanks. The tanks compressed hypermatter to enormous density for storage. The tanks were connected to the main reactor via pipe assemblies. Secondary reactors were located towards the bow of the vessel. And I kind of pointed that out. Dealing with this, or I'm sure a lot of you, even if you're not used to looking at all this stuff, you get the idea of how everything looks. Um, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm some great mind here. The ship's main thrusters were fitted with 8 electromagnetic rudders that deflected the exhaust particle streams and gave boost when turning the ship. The secondary thrusters did not provide much power, but were useful for maneuvering due to being placed further away from the ship's main axis. The massive fin on the stern of the Acclamator class contained both the anti-gravity generators and the ship's hyperdrive generator. When landing, the repulsor craft carried much of the ship's weight, um, but the landing legs maintained a stable contact with the ground. The massive hyperdrive generator took up some 200 meters of the ship's length and allowed a sustained hyperspace cruising speed of class point 0.6. So it is interesting how they're mentioning here, and something I never really thought much of is when you see them landing, you're just thinking that it's landed and it's being supported wholly on the legs. But what they're saying here, and I don't know where they're getting all the information, and just keep it for what it is. They're saying the ship's weight is more than what the legs can actually bear. So to compensate for that, they have the uh, and I just read it. Come on. All right. Um, we're using kind of anti gravity uh, engines um, to kind of sustain it at the height that it needs to be sustained at, so that way they can offload. So um, that is a very interesting uh, concept to say that it needs that at all times. Now, whenever they put these in the dry dock, and if you notice, they do actually have a kind of V landing pad um, set up on Coruscant. Um, and I think that's their dry dock. I'm just going to throw this out here and just say it's a speculative. I think it's their dry dock, so that way they could actually land the ship all the way to the ground, work on whatever they have to work on, and then go from there. But it is interesting that this gets brought up. So, for the history, during the Clone Wars, the Acclamator class design was already in development by Rantha and Quad years before the start of the Clone Wars, and the design was tested as early as 32 BBY. Um, As the Jedi Master Yoda arrived at Camino to gather an invasion force, dozens of acclamators were already built and ready for the soldiers as they were designed to carry. In the first engagement of the First Battle of Geonosis, the class proved pivotal in the Republic victory, delivering legions of clone troopers to the battlefield while a large Republic fleet engaged the Separatist fleet in orbit. After delivering their troops, the Acclamator pulled back and provided orbital support, with only a portion of the ships ending up damaging or being damaged in the battle. Um, so that part, yeah, I do kind of remember them kind of panning up and all that stuff, but I never really paid a lot of attention to that myself. Which I'm just taking in the whole scene, and I usually just take in the whole scene of everything that's kind of going on here. But it's interesting to think about it. So if you read or listen to, because I got it as an audiobook, I'm sorry I cheat. Um, Darth Plagueis the Wise, or I think it's just Darth Plagueis. Um, when they set up for getting the clones created, they also set up to have uh, Rothana design ships and vehicles and everything to try and get them outfitted so that way they could be used. Now, granted, Plagueis and Sidious did not interact with um, uh, the Kaminoans to try and set this up themselves. They did use shoot Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas. They used him to do it for them, and then they had him kind of disposed of. That way, nothing could lead back to them. But so this was all 10 years in the making to get this stuff going. So, when the question comes in, how do they have all this stuff? It was all being built up for years before it actually happened. They didn't just come up with it out of thin air. And then, of course, then we see other people with their own write-ups and everything, seeing that then there's other ships that they brought in and they were doing whatever else, which I'm not going to say it did or didn't happen. But I'm also going to look at it as when you have 10 years to knock out all these ships as you're making a clone force, you have all this stuff being built. Now, maybe there's some stuff that's not going to be online until maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years afterwards. But it just is what it is. All right. So continuing on here, instead of me just blabbering, just after the battle had concluded, the Republic ordered 1,000 more acclamators based on the success as the primary ground force delivery vehicles that they were. All acclamators were completely crewed by clones, though they would also count regular Republic officers among their crew. As the war ground on, apart from this, the acclamators and larger warships were generally off limits to most regular Defense Force personnel. During the height of the war, some acclamators had the paint markings of the open circle fleet, like the Venators. Several different variations were used during the war, with the Acclamator II class assault ship being used or being the most numerous alternate model. The subclasses saw many battles in both Clone Wars and the Galactic Civil War. Many were operated to act as mobile depot ships or dedicated clone commando carriers for the Battle of Munilist. The assault ship Navuta B was modified as a carrier, with her hangar decks dedicated to holding 156 V-19 Torrent starfighters. The Victory class and other Star Destroyers were based on the Acclamator. So we have a very nice write-up. Now, I'm not going to get into the later service and the behind-the-scenes stuff, there is more to be read here. Um, of course, we do see these in Battlefront, Republic Commando, Jedi Starfighter, and of course, Episode 2. Um, let's see, all that. Now, when we look at it in game terms, because this is all by the time that um, Wizards of the Coast had gotten a license, so all the stuff would have come from there and brought over to West End Games. So when we look at the Acclamator class assault ship here, um, it is capital scale. Um, we have that 752 meters long. It has a crew of 700 and our 16,000 troops to be carried on there. Has a cargo capacity of 2,000 metric tons. I'm sorry. Consumables are only for 20 days though, so that means that its actual sitting time is not very long as far as that goes. They're loading these up, getting them wherever they have to go, and then that's pretty much it. Now, if we start taking some of the troops away, or we start taking some of the vehicles away, or whatever, now we can add extra supplies in there, and we can go from that point. But that's a very interesting thought to say it's only really capable of going out for about 20 days before they start running out of food, fuel, other supplies that are really needed. Okay, so bringing it into the West End Games universe, the hyperdrive is at a times 2. The backup is at a times 10. Has a nav computer, of course. Maneuverability is 0D. Now, they do talk about the fact that the maneuver thrusters really weren't overly well. Um, but when you're in space and you're just trying to get it into a dock or whatever, these are not meant for fast maneuvering and all that, like a starfighter is going to be. Okay, it has a space of 6, so it's not very slow. It is faster than a lot of our transports. Not quite starfighter speed here. Um, keep in mind, I can't think of the V-19 Torrents at the moment, but the Y wings were going at 8, so this is at 6. So this is a little bit slower, but not overly so. All right. In an atmosphere, we can go about 950 kilometers an hour. Has a hull of 3D plus 1 and shields of 2D plus 1. So the hull isn't as rough and robust as what we would like to see, but it's not bad. And the shields is just above average, so not bad either, especially seeing that this is our first go at making the galactic clone warship, right? So thinking of it in those regards. All right, our sensor packet. So we can passively scan going out to 4 kilometers. We can actively scan going out to 7 kilometers. We can do a general search going out to 15 kilometers and a focus at 400 meters. So we do have 12 turbo quad lasers. We have 6 in the front left, 6 in the front right, and fire control of 2D, damage of 60, and these are at capital scale. So keep in mind if you're shooting at something smaller that how that changes, because you have your. I know that they had kind of this deployed walkers at one point in the Clone Wars. So if you're trying to hit a walker scale, and I normally talk about capital to starfighter, you're increasing your damage by 2D, but you're also your 2 hit whatever dice you have for your pool will drop by 2D. So it's a trade off. Okay. Um, so when you go down one scale, it becomes 2D harder to try and hit something because you're losing 2 dice there. Always at a minimum of 1. So, I mean, you're always at 1 die. So let's just say that you only, a general person, not a clone trooper or whatever, only has a 2D for like their starship gunnery. If with the fire control, they would normally have 4D trying to shoot at another capital ship. If it goes down to a starfighter, they only have 2D. And if they go down to Walker, they're only going to have 1D. Now, we don't lose 2D entirely because you still have to be able to roll. And it's going to be your wild die. So, is there a possibility you could still hit something? Yeah, there's a possibility. Is it likely? Not so much. So keep that in mind when I say some of the things that I do. Of course, your damage would go up by 4 if you're trying to hit a walker, so that would be 10D for damage. We have 4 assault concussion missile tubes, 20 missiles each. We have a fire control of 3D and damage of 90, and these are at capital scale. So we have concussion missiles and proton torpedoes all at different scales, so all relative. And then we have 24-point laser cannons. These are at starfighter scale, so these are our general. Try to keep all the support fighter craft that are attacking us off of our rear end. We have 2 batteries in the front, 2 batteries in the left, 2 batteries on the right. Yeah, okay. We'll just leave it at that. Fire control of 1D and damage of 4D plus 1. Now, keep in mind, this is at starfighter scale. I'm just trying to figure out the batteries part. Because we have 24 and it's evenly distributed in 3 different areas. So I'm just trying to figure out exactly how that kind of breaks down. So I'm going to say that we have 8 in the front, 8 in the left, and 8 in the right. So that's where we are. Just my mind is trying to work on this morning, and it's just fumbling around. So this is what we have, and it is a wonderful ship. Big write-up. I mean, the fact that when we first get to see the clones at the end, and you kind of hear the what's later on going to be like Darth Vader's kind of theme. We get that iconic view, and it is a wonderful view. And it's a very good ship. I will never kind of knock this. I don't really use it all that much. Usually, I'm later on in the timeline, so we don't see all that many of these. I think for the Jedi to go up against more of the droids and all that stuff was really a good move. We don't see the Jedi just actively killing people, which I think would kind of lessen the Jedi in a way. Not wholly, but it does get them to feel a little bit more that they really take on a society that does want to continue life, whether you agree with it or not. But anyways, um, that's neither here nor there. Everyone's one with the Force at the end of the day, and when you do take a life, they become one with the Force. So, yeah. With that, I hope you enjoy the series. Going back to the ships, and then we're doing droids and some of the other stuff, the vehicles and that. Um, you know, we have a whole galaxy full of things that populate it, and it's wonderful to bring this to you every day. So, as always, I hope you enjoy the series. I enjoy bringing it to you. We'll see you in the next video.